So this is the second lesson on drugs in sport. Now, if we look at your specification, there's three things we've got to try and get through in this video. The reasons why elite performers use drugs, the consequences to society, sport and performers, and also the strategies to stop drugs and doping being used in sport. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is the reasons why elite performers use drugs. So the first reason really is the pressures to succeed. Athletes are under huge pressure from competitors, coaches, families, and also themselves to win. And this has sort of made a win at all costs mentality with a lot of athletes. And they end up making poor decisions as a result of that, like taking drugs. There's also pressure from political pressures as well. So if you look back to the 1970s, 1980s, East German athletes being forced to take certain drugs in order to win gold medals, because politicians understand how important success at Olympics can be for a nation's well-being. But also you've got the recent Russian athletes, 2015, where there was government pressure for athletes to take drugs in order to win more gold medals. So there's a lot of pressure on athletes to succeed. Next, we've got rewards is another reason why they take it. There's huge sponsorship deals as a result of being successful in sport. And this prize money and this fame can motivate athletes to cheat, to try and get to the top, to try and get those big money deals. Now, if we look at a few examples, because you want to be able to bring these up in your exam, you could look at Steph Curry and Under Armour, 11 years, $42 million. Ronaldo and LeBron James with Nike, lifetime endorsements worth about $1 billion, they reckon. So there's big, big money for those athletes that are at the top. Many athletes then make poor decisions like taking drugs to help them get there. Next, athletes might take it to match their competitors. So in some events, athletes just think, well, if everyone else is using them, well, then I need to take it also in order to catch up and keep up with them. And a lot of athletes know it's very difficult to detect new drugs. And a lot of athletes think that taking drugs is just part of the sport. If you look at Tour de France cycling, it's had widespread drug doping problems over the past few years. And athletes probably just think it's part and parcel of the sport, and you need to take it to match the people who are in the lead. On top of that, there is a lack of effective deterrents. So usually you can compete again once you've served your ban. If you look at Justin Gatlin, sprinter, served his drugs ban, then went on to become world champion after that. So there is potentially a lack of punishments in place. And most athletes even believe you won't get caught in the first place anyway. Probably the last reason is it does improve physiological capabilities. It enhances your performance. It improves your chances of success because if you take drugs, you can train longer and train more intensely. If you look at a cyclist taking EPO, for example, they're going to cover more distance, they're going to recover quicker before their next training session. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is looking at the consequences and implications of taking drugs. So we need to look at these three different areas. So we're going to start with the impact of drug taking on sport itself. Now, sports that have been constantly linked to drug taking, like cycling, for example, have had their reputation damaged, and it can be really difficult for those sports to gain sponsorship deals. For example, Sky pulled out of sponsoring Team Sky in cycling as a result of all the drug rumours and speculations. Sports are also under increasing pressure to have a clean image, so they've had to put in place harsher punishments and stricter testing because of the drugs being taken. So that's one of the impacts it's had on sport. They've had to react by putting in harsher and stricter testing in place. And many athletics fans, for example, because there's been a lot of drugs in that as well, are now pretty disaffected and they're starting to move away to other sports rather than just watching athletics. So certain sports are really strongly linked with drugs cheats. You look at Lance Armstrong cycling, Ben Johnson with athletics. And what that happens means is it clouds the judgment or success of any clean athletes in that sport. So when Geraint Thomas won Tour de France as part of Team Sky, there was straight away links of, right, was he taking drugs? Is this a fair win? And it also prevents negative role models to the younger generation because they think that they can't take part in cycling potentially unless they're taking drugs because all the champions in that sport seem to be taking them. So now we're going to move on to the impact of drugs on a performer. But performers should really be aware of the health and social consequences of taking drugs. Back in 2012 in the London Marathon, a woman died quite close, an elite athlete, quite close to the line, and they believed it was a result of taking a legally available performance enhancing drug. So athletes should be aware, and they've got to also be aware that it is a form of cheating and deviancy, and that it puts them at an unfair advantage. So it undermines the whole integrity of the sport that they're taking part in. And the health risks are clear. There's organ defects, long-lasting damage to your body, even potentially death as a result of taking these drugs. So the consequences for an athlete are pretty severe. And when athletes do eventually win a gold medal or break a world record, straight away they might feel like people are judging them. Was their performance down to their hard work, or was it a result of their drug taking? And when they lose, they probably think similar. Were they beaten fairly, or was the person who beat them taking drugs? And finally, it damages the reputations of athletes if you have a positive drugs test. They're going to lose sponsorship, they're going to lose income, they could get banned from a sport, they've been stripped of Olympic medals in the past, and even jail time. Marion Jones, very famous American sprinter, served 6 months in jail in 2008, linked to her drug taking. Next thing we're going to look at then is the impact of drug taking on society. Now, elite sport has always been seen as a fair contest between individuals, and people watch sport to see athletes performing at the highest level. We all know sport is character building, where everyone in it will be striving to do their very best. So society cannot accept or condone any drug taking or doping in sport. Okay, and it has to be challenged by society because it goes against all our cultural norms and all the values we hold as a society. But some people might say, does drug taking just reflect society? Is society full of all these unethical citizens who have this win at all costs mentality? For example, if you look at the Russian doping scandal in 2015, is that just a reflection of Russian society at that particular time? So it also shows up society as having this win at all cost mentality, and that the result of something is always more important than how someone gets there. And some people do say that that might reflect our own society. But there are other implications for our society as well, and things that society needs to think about with drugs in sport. So is it just to ban all athletes who are using drugs? Is it to accept drug taking and make the whole thing legal? Is it to enable the more effective drug taking or drug testing processes to be put in place? Is that what society needs to be focusing on? It also needs to focus on the fact that it's going to create a lot of negative role models for younger children aspiring to be sportsmen. But overall, it sort of undermines that value of sport to society. Sport should be something that is promoted as part of a healthy lifestyle. And if all we're seeing in the news is athletes taking drugs, then it goes against that completely. Now, the last thing we're going to look at are the current strategies in place to stop the use of illegal drugs and doping. So you've got to be aware of the main agencies involved. WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, it's independent and it's really responsible for anti-doping programs, drug testing and research. And they've got a list of banned substances that constantly gets updated. Within the UK, we have the UKAD, the UK Anti-Doping Agency, and it's responsible for protecting UK sports and UK performers against drug taking. So the first strategy we're going to look at is drugs tests. Well, drugs tests have to be regular and random during the season, out of season, to help deter cheats. So they know no matter what time of the season, they could potentially get tested. There's a lot of advanced research into new undetectable drugs, so hoping to get rid of all those labs that are creating these illegal drugs for performers. UKAD is about testing programs for 40 different sports. They've also got biological passports in place to help check and detect any irregularities in athletes' bloods, so that if tests are taken regularly, it's added to their passport, so we can check if there's a significant increase, for example, in testosterone levels in their blood, then it indicates that maybe drugs may have been taken. But what a lot of agencies and sports have done is they've introduced stricter, more random, more regular and out of season testing to help deter any of these drugs cheats. Another big strategy is education and raising the awareness of athletes and coaches to the consequences of taking drugs and doping. All governing bodies will have their own anti-doping program to help educate young athletes. And they use both positive and negative role models to do this. So positive role models to show that you can win clean, and the negative role models show this is what happens to you if you are caught taking drugs. UKAD have two really important courses to be aware of. Coaches Clean, which increases the knowledge of coaches about taking drugs. And for athletes, they have the 100% Me. You can download this app onto your phone. And it's delivered across all parts of the performance pathway, from grassroots up to international level. And they use role models like Chris Hoy, the cyclist, to show that winning clean is possible. But most studies still show that elite athletes would take any performance enhancing drug or substance as long as it wasn't on the banned list. So maybe there still needs to be a lot more education for these athletes, because it seems like they're willing to take anything as long as it's not banned. The next thing we're going to look at is punishments. WADA increased their punishments in 2015 from 4 to 4 years, and then you get a lifetime ban after that if you're caught for a second offence. Athletes have also had their medal strips retrospectively. Usain Bolt had a relay medal taken, a gold medal from the Olympics taken from him because of one of his teammates was retrospectively caught for drug taking. UKAD will ask you to return all your career earnings and any money gained from sponsorship if you're caught. And the big thing is about naming and shaming these drugs cheats to stop anyone else doing the same thing. And there's also the threat of banning a whole nation as well. If you look at Russia back in 2015, caught big drug scandal there, government pressure for athletes to take drugs, and they ended up banning the whole team from the Rio 2016 Olympics. So punishments are in place, but you've got these three big strategies that you've got to try and understand. And we'll go through them all a little bit more in the next lesson.